Well met, friends, Yoyston here, bringing you another lore review. This time, it is about a movie that has divided fans, and I'm sure many of you have seen it. The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, directed by Peter Jackson and released in 2012. Also, this will be a review for the extended edition of the movie. Today, we're going to take a look at this movie and see how it holds up in the context of Tolkien's works. As this is a lore review, I won't focus too much on the technical aspects of the movie, but I will rather look at the settings, characters, and stories of the movie, and compare them to J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, to see how the movie functions in accordance with its inspiration. However, I have to give a quick honorable mention to the technical aspects of the movie. The cinematography, musical score, audios, and visuals are all very well done in my opinion, and they help transport me to Peter Jackson's version of Middle-earth. And I would be remiss if I didn't say the actors did a fantastic job. And please, keep this in mind as we discuss the movie, that my opinions are just those, opinions. And opinions can change and mold over time. Criticism is subjective, and if you agree or disagree with what I say, please let me know in the comments down below. And please remain respectful towards all comments. In this video, I will also talk about the bigger picture points, such as the main characters and overarching plot points, rather than some of the smaller details that may not affect either the book or the movie. With all that said, let's get into the lore review. Before we get into detail, I must say that I do find enjoyment in all of Peter Jackson's Middle-earth films, and I do like them all to some degree. Alongside the nostalgia that I hold for these movies that I grew up with, they do their job in transporting me into Middle-earth. However, for this review, I'm going to put that nostalgia aside for an objective review. This first movie is my favorite of the three Hobbit movies, as the things that I like about this movie happen less and less as the trilogy goes on, and the problems that I have with this movie happen more and more as the trilogy goes on. So, does The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey hold up as a faithful adaptation to Tolkien's novel, The Hobbit? Well, yes and no. In some aspects, Jackson's team really depict the Middle-earth and characters that Tolkien wrote, but in other ways, the movie interrupts itself with content that really doesn't belong there. From a lore standpoint, this movie is a mixed bag for me, so let's jump into the details and reasons as to why that is. Let's start with the sets, and how they are faithful to Tolkien. The settings that are on screen are still breathtaking 6 years after the film was released. The Shire, Rivendell, Gollum's Cave, these are all places that Jackson and his crew created very well in my opinion. It feels like I'm there, with those characters in the story. Tolkien was a romantic writer when it came to settings and descriptions of nature, and the movie addresses these incredible sights with passion and love for the source material. One of the only set pieces in the movie that I feel is unnecessary when looking at this movie by itself is Weathertop. I'll address this and other tie-ins to The Lord of the Rings later in the review. Personally, as this is a tale about Bilbo Baggins and his adventures, I don't think we needed to see Dol Guldur nor Mirkwood yet. But I understand that they showed it to set up for the next movie. Really, other than Weathertop, I feel that the settings depicted are really faithful to Tolkien's works, and they are necessary to the context of this movie's story. They did very well in this aspect. Now, onto the characters, which I feel are the most important parts of any story. Without proper characters to relate to, we care nothing for their trials or accomplishments. This is where the movie diverges from Tolkien's works a bit. The protagonist, Bilbo Baggins, as portrayed by Martin Freeman, is pretty much perfect in my opinion. As with the Bilbo in the book, this character is able to resonate with audiences, inspire people, and accomplish great deeds, while also remaining a humble hobbit who loves the comforts of home. The scenes like Bilbo and Gollum asking each other riddles, or Bilbo giving mercy to Gollum, or even throughout the movie when Bilbo doubts himself, I believe that this is a Bilbo Baggins that Tolkien would have liked had the professor seen this movie. My favorite moments of the movie are in fact about Bilbo, and I wish we got more of them. His character is the one that most audiences connect with in this story, as most of us prefer home over adventure and comfort over battle. So when the movie sidelines him, it also sidelines the audience. In my opinion, this character is close to the archetype set in the novel. As for Gandalf the Grey, I have no complaints about Ian McKellen's portrayal or his role in the movie, save one. I do see Gandalf the Grey on screen when this legendary actor comes into frame, as Mr. McKellen plays him as wise, kind, and powerful. Gandalf's scene with Galadriel talking about real courage has to be the best scene in the entire movie that is not in the books. My only real issue is that this movie gives Gandalf, who plays the role of Bilbo's mentor, too much subplot and screen time, and it diverges from our main character's role in the story. But I'll get more into that when we speak about the plot. Another character to mention is Thorin Oakenshield, played by Richard Armitage. I do enjoy his performance, and I think it works in the context of not only this movie, but this trilogy. My problem with Thorin Oakenshield in this movie is like my problem with Gandalf, but to a much higher degree. The movie gives him way too much screen time and attention. It decided to age him down, making him younger than Balin, which is untrue in the novel, so that he could function as another protagonist with another mentor. And the movie gives him also an antagonist, which it doesn't even do for Bilbo. My overall problem with not only this Hobbit movie, but all three of them, is how much time is devoted to Thorin and Azog instead of Bilbo and his trials. The decision to age Thorin down and give him more scenes and his own enemy makes him just as much of a main character as Bilbo Baggins. Personally, I don't like that fact in this movie. It is called The Hobbit, not The Dwarf, so we should spend more time with Bilbo than Thorin in the first place. Now, this movie does give Bilbo a fair amount of screen time, but it seems that Thorin has a near equal amount. In the book, Thorin acts more as one of Bilbo's main companions, and even somewhat as a mentor at times, but really nothing more. So if the story would have made him older and more of a companion figure, while also using that time to focus on Bilbo and his coming into courage, the film overall would have been cleaner, and more on point with the book and story it's trying to tell. The last main character that we'll talk about is Azog the Defiler. In the books, Dain Ironfoot slays this orc at the Battle of Azanul-Bazar, or the Battle of Moria. His son, Bolg the Orc, is the real leader of the orcs in the Misty Mountains during the time of the Hobbit. So Azog's mere existence in the story of the Hobbit is, in itself, only a part of the movie but not a part of the book. Now, I'm not a book purist, and I understand that some changes must be made when adapting a book to a movie, game, or TV show. However, my problem with this change is that Azog also distracts from the story of Bilbo, as he is now not only Thorin's arch-nemesis, but the overarching villain for all three movies. In my opinion, as this is Bilbo's story about his adventures, the antagonist of this movie should be Gollum. At the climax of the movie, Bilbo comes toe-to-toe with this creature and beats him in a game of riddles. After this, Bilbo decides not to kill Gollum after finding the way out of his cave. This moment should have been the hero overcoming and beating the villain. However, we get Thorin confronting and losing to Azog right after, as the climax of hero versus villain in this movie. I think the movie would have been just fine if Bolg was the leader that we never really see that much, and his orcs and wargs are the ones that we should fear. That way, we would feel scared for our characters, and primarily for Bilbo and Goblin Town, and during the last fight scene in the forest. Now, I know changing the villain of this movie would change a lot for all three movies, but in my opinion, Gollum serving as Bilbo's personification of fear would have been a perfect villain for this film alone. In Bilbo overcoming Gollum, he would have found his courage and mercy. So that's what I think about Azog in this movie. He was the unnecessary antagonist, and even less screen time with him, and more focus on Bilbo's character building, would have improved the movie greatly in my opinion. Speaking of Gollum, as always, Andy Serkis's portrayal of him was perfect, and even with a few minutes of screen time, I really felt for Gollum in this movie. He doesn't have much besides the ring. He gets somewhat of a friend and enemy in Bilbo, but in the end he lost both his precious and his frenemy. I think Gollum had the perfect amount of screen time, and I have no criticisms for him. As for the supporting characters, I like them overall. I love that the Dwarves of Thorin's company all have their own quirks and character, and honestly I would have liked to see a few more lines for each character, as I believe their characters are worth knowing in this movie. As for the White Council, it was cool to see them as a Tolkien fan, but I don't think the amount of screen time they got was necessary in this movie, which I will talk about more in the plot and story part of this video. So that's it for characters. There are definitely some I didn't even mention, but the ones that I didn't mention I like in the context of the story. Finally, we come now to the plot of the film. Like I said before, the biggest problem with this movie and the trilogy as a whole are the distractions from the main character of Bilbo Baggins. The reason we have this issue is because there are way too many subplots for one movie, even a longer running one such as this. Here are the subplots that hold the movie down. The story of Angmar, Ringwraiths, the Morgul Blade, and the White Council, the early signs of Thorin's dragon sickness, Thorin's distrust of Bilbo, Radagast's adventure in Mirkwood that resolves in him being in the Trollshaws, somehow, which in itself is a ridiculously long journey. Random ongoing connections to The Lord of the Rings, and of course, Thorin vs. Azog. There are 6 subplots alongside the story of There and Back Again, and Bilbo's growth as a character. If the movie would have focused up on Tolkien's story, rather than being in all of these different interludes, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey would have been a clean, well-paced movie that focused on Bilbo finding courage and adventure. Don't get me wrong, it was awesome to see the White Council, but in the books, they already suspected Sauron had returned at this point, and they were in debate to do something about it. Saruman only pushed the Council to act in 2941 to prevent Sauron from finding the One Ring, before he could. The return of the Nazgul was already known because of the Witch King's war with Arnor, but I'm not even sure Arnor was a kingdom in Jackson's movies, even though Galadriel mentions the Men of Rudar. That's what I mean, the movie gets messy, not only concerning the lore of all of the books, but all of the movies as well. And it seems like the White Council subplot was just added to give Gandalf something to do. Now, to be fair, the White Council does meet and attack Dol Guldur in the book, but that happened off-book as to not distract from Bilbo's story. So, that is what I would call these subplots, distracting. The only stories that truly need to happen are the quest of Erebor, Bilbo finding his courage, and Thorin's early distrust of Bilbo that gets dispelled at the end of the movie. If they really wanted to show a smaller version of Gandalf's subplot that actually did happen in the books, where the White Council meets and afterwards attacks Dol Guldur after Gandalf leaves Thorin's company on the outside of Mirkwood, that would have been perfectly fine to do in the next 2 movies, but instead they used a lot of time in this movie to set it up, rather than focusing on the 3 true stories that I've already mentioned. As for the tie-ins to The Lord of the Rings, there are a few too many for my taste. It's awesome to see Frodo again, and the Shards of Narsil, etc., but if we are to believe that The Hobbit is its own narrative in Middle-earth, there needs to be a balance between these kinds of fan services and cameos, and The Hobbit's own world-building as well. Overall, when the plot focuses on Bilbo's story, the movie picks up again, and I do find that the moments that feature or are about Bilbo are the most compelling, as The Hobbit is truly a tale about finding courage and answering the question, what does it mean to be a hero? That is what this movie should have focused on. Instead, it had too much going on at once. When the plot is focused, it is really great, and when it's distracted, you feel distracted, and it somewhat breaks the illusion. Some of it worked, and some of it didn't. Again, there are inconsistencies between the books and the movies, like Glamdring and Orcrist not glowing blue, but in the context of Jackson's Middle-earth, it makes sense that he wanted Sting to be more special that way. Do I wish we could have seen those swords in their full book glory? Sure, but again, some changes have to be made, and I'm okay with that. This is just one of many examples of the changes that Jackson made from the book that I'm okay with. And concerning my criticisms for the movie, I don't blame Peter Jackson or his crew for them. There's a lot of evidence out there that suggests this isn't the movie that they actually wanted to make. Warner Brothers was too involved in its production, Peter Jackson didn't have enough pre-production time after the previous director stepped out, and there were work protests going on in New Zealand at the time. If given more time and autonomy, I'm sure Jackson and his team would have fixed many of these issues. With all that said, I do find enjoyment in this movie. It really is a mixed bag for me, and part of me will always love it for nostalgic purposes, but I think that these are all ideas worth talking about. This movie understands Tolkien's themes and tones of love, courage, mercy, and others, so I will always love it as a piece of Middle-earth media. I believe that this movie is at its best when it follows Tolkien's ideas. The professor's settings, characters, and stories all have heart and soul to them, and that is why we love his world so much. If I were to give The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, the extended edition, grades out of 10, they would be a 9 for settings, a 7 for characters, and a 6 for plot. For the overall lore grade, I would give it a 7 out of 10. But the grades and values aren't important. The ideas and the conversations are. So let me know what you all think about The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Was it what you wanted when you saw it for the first time, or has it changed over the years and become something else? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, I really hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like more lore reviews about the games, movies, and other pieces of media that portray Tolkien's works, please let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to contact me more directly, please join us on Facebook and Twitter through the links in the description below. And please subscribe to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today. I will see you all soon with another Middle-earth video, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my friends.